All right, so since we're talking about fear, I have to share a fear story, okay? So I lived in Rome my junior year of college, and this is during the late 80s, just before the wall crashed. Girls weren't allowed out at night. Women weren't allowed out at night. They just didn't go out at night. But I had gone over to my friend from school who was house sitting in one of the old buildings around Rome, ancient. Imagine your apartment being ancient. And we were getting ready to head back to the campus because she had both, the house sitting and a dorm room. And so we went out to the bus stop. Now, remember, the only women out at night are the women who sell themselves to make money. And so, men pull up in a car. A man pulls up in a car and speaks to us. You know what he's asking for. Let's just say everybody at that time was singing George Michael, I Want Your Sex. It was very weird, by the way. So we convinced him that no, we were not going to do that. And he drove away only to come back around the building with another car of men. And so your adrenaline spikes at that point because it's two women, and now there are two cars, although they are Fiat, so like it's not intimidating like here where it would be a truck, right? It was a Fiat. Two cars. And then a police officer drives up. And he talks to the men and tells them to move along. And so the cars all pull away and he goes around the block and the man is back in front of us. And the police cars show up again with 3 or 4 of them with their lights flashing, and they get out with their mini Uzis and tell the men they better leave. And the police officer stays with us until we get on the bus. So I had all sorts of mixed feelings about that. One, the unfairness of women not being able to go out at night without being seen in a way that is unkind and is dangerous. 2, being a political scientist, my feelings toward the police are very mixed and not very kind because I know what police officers do, especially to the poor and to people of color. 3, the police officers had Uzis. I mean, machine guns. I had never seen a police officer with a machine gun before. And that sent a whole new level of fear because even as the police officers sent the men away, that doesn't mean you're safe. I know all the stories of police officers. So you can imagine both of us are praying for that bus to arrive quickly and speedily. Fear. That sense that you're not safe, that the world isn't safe. Our story today is about fear. It says, in the time of Herod. What does that mean? So, you know me, I actually looked up. So which Herod was it and what was the time like? It turns out the Herod that would have probably been alive when we think Jesus was alive was a time of peace and quiet and the world was pretty safe. So the Herod they're describing in our text is more likely his father, who would have been before we think Jesus was born. And that Herod, Herod the Great, was not kind, was not quiet, was not peaceful. He did things to the people that lived in his territory that made them fearful. But what is it like to live under empire? Because here's the thing, until after World War II, for the most part, people lived a very agrarian life, meaning that you made most of what you ate in your home garden and you stored it up hoping it would make it through the winter. That was the same back then as it was until around World War II. People lived barely surviving. They scraped by what they needed so they could buy extras. If you didn't have chickens, you bartered for eggs. If you had cows, you traded milk for whatever it was you needed. Life was difficult. It has been that way for centuries. And so in that time, whoever the leader was, honestly, whether it would have been as an Israeli king or a Roman empire, it didn't matter. Your life was hard. The people who in the cities had it a little bit easier because jobs welled up in cities that provided a better living. But where Jesus and John are supposed to be coming from isn't that. It's little villages where people helped each other to survive. And so our story today is Zechariah, a priest. A priest who is usually called to the temple you draw lots, or sometimes you're chosen, to go into the holiest of the holies to light the incense and the candles. And it happened to be his time. Now, here's the thing. Like when you're a pastor or a priest, you don't normally expect God to actually appear in front of you. You don't expect the holy to make an appearance. You are just lifting up prayers to God. And you can feel the presence of the holy, but it's more that sense of calm and peace and quietness. It isn't the holy there in form. And so Zechariah lives in this time of empire where things aren't easy. And as a priest, I can tell you what that is like. When we were little, my parents loved the week somebody gave us a chicken. Because then it meant that we had food that was filling and nourishing in a way that they couldn't always afford to feed the kids. They loved it when Christmas came around because there would be baskets of food given to us. That's what it was like for him. If his main job was priest, he was dependent on the people to see to the care and well-being of him and his wife. But in there was also this fear that was a sense of longing. A longing that had never been fulfilled for him and his wife. A longing to be the same as everyone else, to have children that could sustain and support you and care for you. A longing that had never happened. And so when he's in there lighting that candle, he's praying for those people in his care. He's asking God's presence for his people. He's asking for hope. And then God breaks it. An angel comes. So, in this image, Zechariah is full of fear. We can't even see his face, but we can see him hunched in among himself. And the angel comes, and you need to tell your husband, Doug, this was made with Sinotype. Like we did that on Earth Day, where she took pine needles and other natural objects and made them into a piece of art that is made by use of the sun. She said it failed the very first time, so then she had to reset it all, redo it again, and let the sun work. And what she says is, what I imagined and what you can see is the breath of the angel the words of the angel blowing into Zechariah, she says, do not be afraid. But that's not easy right now, right? I know that there is this just existential dread that a lot of people have. A sense that the world is out of control, that things are not easy, that things just set us on edge. So the story that got to me yesterday was the college student heading home for Thanksgiving who was arrested in Boston airport and deported to Honduras just because she wanted to come home and see her family. That there's this sense of fear, that there's a longing for something more, for something better. Think of all the things that we have to be fearful of. We have, one of the books, or the two books that I've been reading have been by Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. And I finished the one, but some of my other book club members may not have finished it. But it's a book about what if we get it right? What are the possibilities that if we change the way we live, that we can save each other and save the planet? But throughout the book, and her other one, All That We Can Save, is this sense of fear that it might not be enough. That because of all that has been happening with our government, most of us have forgotten that existential dread we have that the earth is dying, being killed right now. And we aren't doing enough to stop it. And when asked in one of her podcasts, she's asked about a chapter in her book that's called Hope. Because she said when somebody was interviewing her, and I think it was her cousin who's a poet, that the publishers kept taking the chapter out. Over and over again, they would say, no, we don't want that in the book. Because you would think with the title Hope that you would want it in the book. But she says that people always come up to her and ask her, what makes you hopeful? How do you stay optimistic? And Ayanna, Dr. Johnson, says, I didn't get what the question was for a long time. Because I'm a scientist. I'm an ocean scientist, a marine biologist. And when I look at the oceans, I am in such dread. Because in a year now, the current pattern in the Atlantic Ocean is going to break apart. And then they think that it's possible that England might be freezing and Canada might become desertified when that breaks. And so for her, she says, I don't have hope. But I work every day to make sure that this planet stays alive. And she says, what I figured out, what it took me a long time to realize, is that what people were really asking was, can you please give me hope? I need some. And that version of the question, that vulnerable and true version, that tell me how you know I can keep going version, I totally get it. We, those of us trying to turn things around, are not robots. We are humans with heaps of emotions and attachments and fears. That's her hope, she says. That I don't really believe in hope, but I believe and give me the strategic plan that will get us there, and let's work on that plan. But I hear your pain when you ask me, what can we do? And I've got a list. And in the book, every beginning section has a list of things, possibilities and promises, and also dangers. And that's the thing about fear and hope, that they can be there present at the same time. That in a time of fear, in a time of Herod, when the world was loud with the threat of empire, when rebellion was put down in deadly manners, when we who know the whole story, even though we're talking about the birth, know that empire fights back and destroys Jesus at the end. It doesn't destroy him completely, but empire takes his life. And that's the fear that people were living with. That if they did the wrong thing, stepped in the wrong place, had the wrong documents, if they said the wrong words, that empire would take them out. And into that fear, into Zechariah's fear, comes the angel that says, do not be afraid. Now the thing is, Zechariah is fearful. He's fearful for that whole time of Elizabeth's pregnancy. In fact, he cannot speak and share what happened to him because his fear has taken so much hold of him. But into that grief and fear and longing, the angel breaks in. God breaks in, offering a moment of hope. Saying that hope that you have wanted for, that longing that you have had deep in your soul, I'm going to help usher it in. I'm going to break into the world to help your hope come to life. In that time of fear, God heard a prayer and responded with presence. Liza Gwynne Garrity, one of the artists, tells a story when she describes some of the art she has created and why they came to this theme of finding hope in a time of fear, with fear as a question. She says that she lived in a place where when Hurricane Helene came in, it wiped out her and her daughter's favorite park. It was now a sandbox, a beach, rather than the place that they used to go to play, where there was a wildflower field that her daughter loved to run through and dance in and pick flowers in. But now, since the storm, when they went to that park that she had been avoiding but her daughter begged to go to, wasn't the same. She had this fear of what wasn't there anymore. This fear that another hurricane could come and it would be worse this next time. But her daughter, in that field of wildflowers that were now burnt and seed husks, lay down and made angels in the sand, started picking those seeds and blowing them far and wide, twirling and dancing. She danced and twirled in a swirl of wildflower seeds. In that moment, I realized what it means to insist on hope in a fearful and heavy world. We must toss seeds of hope into the wind and trust that God will plant something new, even in the midst of destruction. In the time of Herod, the world was loud with the empire's threats, echoing with grief and longing, and still God broke in. In that time of fear, God heard a prayer and responded by coming to earth.